Hello, everybody. I'm Rachel Milano, the founder of REMwell Foundation. I thought I'd get started a little bit earlier, just a couple minutes to help me get my little anxieties out of the way. This is a really, really deep topic tonight, and it came at a request of another survivor. So I figured, why not let's address these issues of depression and how to somehow expedite it or cut the time that we stay in the depression. In fact, you can cut it in half again, and half again. And there are some ways in which we can do that. There's like cool tips and tools that we can use to help expedite that process. Weird thing is, I'm going to say some stuff that's really strange. That might seem really strange, but then, I'm a survivor. What's new? Okay, so now that I've got my little nervous stuff out, my little nervous jitters, hello to the room. It's still me in there by myself. It's okay. It's okay. Hello, hi, room. It's exactly 9 o'clock. So see, I took a few minutes to get my ums and uhs out of the way. Okay. So we have been doing the series, Talk Till Someone Listens. This is the subject or category cutting, living, I guess, cutting half the time with depression, right? So living and having that session half the time. So if you're already experiencing repeat episodes of persistent depression, then, or if you like me, where they kind of come up out of the blue periodically, which wasn't the case always, mind you. I used to have depression like a lot for a very, very long period of time. But if you've gotten to a place where it's more manageable, then, some of this will be like additional tips for you. And then if you are still like in the struggle of how to cope and manage, and a lot of this is new stuff that you can apply. First and foremost, let me get off the top that if you are experiencing any degree of depression which has led to the serious nature, leaning towards suicide or leaning towards harming yourself or someone else, this is not a video you should be watching. You should be getting immediate intervention, okay? There are suicide hotlines available. There's support groups available. There's 911 always available. So this is really for those who are looking for tips to reduce the amount of time spent in depression. So now that I have my urgent care situation taken care of, go get help immediately if you feel that you are grasping for straws. This is not a grasping for straws talk topic, okay? So I wish you the very best. And I encourage you to make the healthiest decision in whatever your state is. And by state, I mean state of mind, as well as what state you're in. Okay, so obviously, depression comes from somewhere, right? It's in here, and regardless of what happens in this environment has its own storms. It has its own natural disasters. It has its own impact and its own rhythm and its own flow and its own crises management, its own filtration system. It is its own environment. So it's always key when remembering that you're a traumatic violation survivor, or you're connected to someone, or you love someone who's a traumatic violation survivor, is that this internal environment is very unique to this one. They are not inseparable, but they are unique, right? So one does impact the other, and one does impact the other, okay? A few triggers. I've had umpteen triggers. Sometimes a trigger comes a couple weeks in advance, and it's stewing and brewing, yeah, like a hurricane, right? Hurricanes, they say, oh, offshore. I'm going to do a lot of weather stuff and a lot of analogies using terms regarding weather patterns and weather conditions, because really that's what depression is. It is a weather condition. Whether or not things are okay out here, things may not be okay in here. And the brain has a natural, organic way of dealing with that. And it works much like our own external natural system and how it works. So weather patterns and there's conditions that are ripe, and the clouds and the temperature and all of these things come together to create perfect storms, or to brew clouds, or to brew overcast, or to brew rain, or all these are weather conditions. But you know what? We have ours too. Oh, I forgot to turn my phone volume down. I'm so sorry. I will pick up just a second. Here we go. So my references today tonight will be about these weather patterns. Okay, so just like with a hurricane, all right, when you have a hurricane, and usually if you turn on the news, it will say, oh, you know, we see a hurricane and the path is taking this direction and it's expected to hit landfall at such and such time. It's coming with gale force winds of blah, blah, blah. And they tell you everything you need to know. This doesn't happen with depression. If a tornado is expected, which is much faster than a hurricane, because a tornado can appear out of nowhere. See, dirt devils and all that kind of stuff, they're all versions of the same thing. Cyclones on the water, they're all versions of the same thing, but they carry different different weights or severities, degrees of severity, right? They could do vast damage. They could last for longer. They could last for real quick, short amounts of time and still do a lot of damage. So in relationship to when a storm is brewing, okay, because what I'm referring to now is that timeline, that expectation that there's something happening and you feel something happening and the shifts are occurring, and then depression, right? So the brewing stage, it usually accompanies a trigger of some kind, right? So that trigger doesn't have to be yesterday, 2 minutes ago, an hour ago, a month ago. It could be something that triggered the depression as long as years ago. And then when you're older, at some point, it breaks, especially if your traumatic violation experiences were less than 5 or less than any particular number of times per type. Actually, there's no particular number, but the more that there are, the sooner the onset of depression. I mean, that's with anything in life. The more stress you put on something, the faster and easier it breaks, right? So there comes a certain breaking point in the brain too, where it begins to try to overcompensate. And what happens is, for traumatic violation survivors, and not all, but I'm speaking to the ones who are experiencing repetitive depression. But what happens a lot of the times is these triggers are just the beginning. And then there is this period of time where there's the build up, right? Because you're triggered. And then now you still have to function, okay? You still have to function, like you have to go to work, you have to take care of the kids, you have to pay your bills. You have to like function in life. You have to do all this, you know, regular routine, normal stuff, okay? And then what happens is the brain, your brain as a traumatic violation survivor, has to function and work, okay, has to work as if it functions as built, right? You're organic, right? So you're built organic. You have a DNA, and in the course of all of that unfolds. So it functions as built, but it has to do overload, overwork, overcompensation, has to work harder than in the as is condition. As is condition is, here I am, the traumatic violation survivor. That's my as is state. But when I leave this door and I have to go out into the real world, I kind of have to function. And I have to like look and act like other people, especially in places like the workforce, where there's protocol for behavior, and or if you go into a specific type of venue and there's protocol for behavior. So these are things in which we have to modify our mind to the parameters that are set in society. So I don't know if you've ever like gone somewhere fancy to eat and you have to like sit with your legs a certain way because, you know, it's like you're feeling hoity-toity and like you have to, but then like, after a while and you're done and you leave the place, you're like, dang, whew, I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore. Because your mind was focused on trying to do something it doesn't normally do. It isn't, it's built to do it. Yes, it can do it, but it doesn't normally do that. Or if you have gone to a fancy play, you know, where it's not just casual, but it's more, you know, dressed up and formal. And so you have to be presentable. And so that effort to be presentable for long periods of time, even and especially following a triggering experience, burns the brain out. It causes mental exhaustion, just like you could have physical exhaustion from sitting a certain way or working out too much, too quickly, too hard, not taking care of yourself in the process, trying to meet demands and demands and demands. Well, the same thing is happening to your brain, especially if you have endured traumatic violation, because on one level, you are enduring what happened to you however many times, over however many years. You're enduring that, and maybe you're getting help for it, and maybe you're not. And on top of that, you have to continue to function as normal. So this is as is, and this is as normal. This is as built. This is as society has been built to deal and to have people in what is considered the norm to function and interact and co-create and build society, right? So we build our country by what we're made of, right? So some of us are overcompensating from the as is, trying to raise to this bar, to this expectation of presence. Everybody has to do it, but so traumatic violation survivors overdo it. They have to raise themselves above that. And then when they have done that work and the engine has been going and going and going and going, it's almost like the coolant system. The coolant system malfunctions, it just overheats. And what happens when you have fatigue, when you have exhaustion? Everything that sounds like depression happens with fatigue. It's just physical fatigue can have the same consequences that mental fatigue can have. So really what is happening with depression is absolutely normal for traumatic violation. And I repeat these things over and over again, and you'll hear me in every video I ever do, I'm sure, repeat that this is normal for traumatic violation. Isn't normal for every circumstance. It isn't normal for every condition, but it is normal for people who have endured and continue to endure traumatic violation, to undergo circumstances and situations where their mind, where the brain is overcompensating, has overcompensated, has been overworked, and then it shuts down. And there isn't a whole lot, depending on how long that has been. The longer, honestly, that you haven't given yourself little ventilations in between, where I say unplug from the stressors of life, because if you don't unplug all along the way, it's building up. It's building up. It's building up in here. It's overworking. It's overworking and it's building up. And then the more that it builds up, the deeper the depression. I mean, that can happen in a very short amount of time, depending on what's going on in your life and how much load you are carrying on top of violation. You understand? We're talking about the difference between carrying it and carrying it on top of traumatic violation. These are things that you have yet to work out or are still working out, and that's a load in its own. That's a full-time job. Like, you're doing it all the time. I'm doing it right now. You know how hard I have to work not to be flippant in my mouth? Like, it's work all the time to keep up a certain presence that is expected from society. And had we not endured these things, we may have maintained. We may have been on the same platform with everyone else, right? And when I say everyone else, I'm talking about the other 2/3, right? Because we are a third of the population. So the other 2/3, we would have been, you know, along the same lines as what is expected of them and what they have to bring forward to the table. So what we bring to the table is what we present, not always what we represent, okay? And sometimes we are truly in distress, and we represent that in the subconsciousness of our living. Subconscious doesn't stop existing because we are consciously focused on something. Like, it comes together, it moves forward together at all times. And you're filtering everything that happens to you all day long through your conscious and subconscious, and your mind is deciding what to do with all of those things at gazillions of whatever seconds, millibytes, or whatever. Like your computer, it's computing it very, very fast, okay? And so we have to take into consideration that perfect storms are created. So for us, we have this unique weather pattern, right, that goes on inside of us. If you look at the United States map, right, like, you know, there are certain places that are flood zones. And you know that there are certain places that are tornado alley. Kansas, look at New Orleans for being the bowl, you know. And there's certain things that may come up weather-wise, when they see it coming and they see, it might hit the path of this area, which is highly prone to having these types of storms. Fires, forest fires. Look at California. Look at Denver. Look at Pennsylvania. Look at areas where they've been prone to have mass fire damage. Those are the types of storms that they are susceptible to. The type of storm we're susceptible to is depression, anxiety, right? We're susceptible to having these more or less frequently, really dependent on how well we are able to manage this and this, okay? So there are coping skills that we can adopt to help us try to bridge this gap. If we don't do the work in trying to do that, then that gap, right, doesn't become bridged. It actually grows further apart, okay? Because you still have to do this, but because you're trying to do this and you can't keep up, and this is still happening, you're getting further and further from it because you're not doing the work to bridge the gap. Will they ever truly be on the same page as one another? Probably not. Probably not. But you have the potential and the opportunity to bring it as close as you personally can, okay? So, causes. The primary cause is mental overexertion, more mind work to function. It takes more mind working to be functional, right, than in the nature of being functional than it does in the nature of being as is, just who you are, okay? And that eventually leads to brain fatigue or exhaustion. And then really, honestly, when you're at that position, when you're at that place and the storm is already there, like, if you weren't prepared for the storm, which you know that if, you know, you have this likelihood of having this storm. It's not a guarantee, like it could go away and never come back, but the likelihood is if you haven't done the work here, it's coming back. And even if you do the work here, it's coming back because you've only made this much, you've bridged the gap this much. So there's still this space of exertion, this overworking space that has to happen, right? Because you still have to live, and you still have to live with traumatic violation. So the understanding and the acknowledgement This is the first part of it all. It's just acknowledging, like, nobody wants to have depression. Nobody wants to. It's very intrusive. It interferes with everything you got going on. You had plans, now your plans are derailed. Like, nobody wants depression. You have money to make. You have things to do, children to take care of, family members to take care of. You have stuff you'd rather be doing than being depressed. So depression is not a choice. Okay, so for those of you in the world who are connected to people who you love and who experience depression, whether that is regularly or persistently or chronically or just periodically. I hate that term just, and I don't even like when I do it. So I'm correcting myself as I go along. I don't mean just as to minimize, because any one experience with depression and anxiety is an awful one. Okay, so scratch that, nix that just thing. All right. I think I got a piece of my own hair in my mouth. Anyways, there we go. So there are different things: empty nest syndrome, hormones from menopause, family distress, bankruptcy, illness, economic instability, workforce instability, problems on the job, relationship problems on the job, relationship problems at home, family crises, whether that's divorce or child management disagreements, and challenges academically, stressors that could be you trying to be make people proud and overachieve, or try to really impress people who love and care for you, on top of violation, right? So all of these things, social media. Yo, social media can be cruel. I'm sure they'll be cruel to me too. It's okay. It's not okay. It's bad that they're doing it, but it's okay for me at this time, because in this place, I'm able to understand and know that, hey, look, these people don't even know what they're doing. I'm not even going to give that religious reference. I was going to give a religious reference. Some of you might even already know what it was, but I'm not going to give one. But sometimes they don't know what it is they're doing. They don't understand the significance of the impact, the gravity of what they're doing. A lot of people say things in jest and joking, and they act like it's funny and it's cute. That shit's not humorous, right? It's degrading. It's behind the back of our ear, itching us and agitating us and making us feel less appreciated and more isolated and less desired and less wanted. And they'll tell you, oh, get thick-skinned, you're so thin-skinned, you wear your feelings on your heart, and you're so sensitive, don't be oversensitive. They say these things are very insulting. The fact of the matter is, we're not trying to be that. Like, there's no effort on our part to wake up and think, today I will be sensitive. Today I will, and when somebody says something to me, I'm just going to feel sensitive, okay? Like, that's just how I want to do it. That does not happen. But that is the way, and the impression that we're given is that that's the way that it goes. So, since you know the storm is coming, and you can acknowledge that since you've had the storm, if you've ever had the storm of depression, then you know you are in the path in which, that is the environment in here, that there is a path in which depression has root. Okay? Root as in has a GPS strategy. There is a way. There is a way in there that depression has been able to touch ground, right? Touch ground in here, right? That is touchdown, right? So, storm is brewing, and it's brewing, and it's brewing, and it's coming in, and then it has touchdown. It makes contact. It actually is something that has become a category this or a category that. Or we don't call it category anything. We call, unless it's a name category, we call it severity, or we label it by severity is what I'm trying to say. We label it by severity, not by category. Maybe there'll be some change in that someday, who knows? So let me drink some water because I'm now prepared. So since you are aware that depression has hit your system before, and many, many times before perhaps, since there is a history and a repeat history, especially if there's a repeat history, because that's what this is all about. This is about people who have had repeat experiences or impacts with depression. So since you're aware of that, the first thing you got to do is acknowledge that depression is a part of your life, and it is part of your internal environment, and it is part of the possibilities in your life experience. That's the first thing. Acknowledge it. Because if you don't acknowledge it, you can't deal with it, right? If I don't acknowledge anything that's going on in a disaster relief effort in Louisiana or in Texas, if I don't acknowledge it, I don't have to do nothing about it. It doesn't mean it's not happening, right? Okay, so if I acknowledge it, then I can say, you know what? This has been a depression zone. This has been a depression zone. Therefore, I must have disaster relief services. I need to have, just like in the real weather world, right? In the internal weather world, I need to have a plan. Okay? That means I am actually saying plan for depression. How about that? Huh. Plan for depression. I plan for depression. Yes, I do, and I have for years. I plan very well ahead of time, and when the time comes, and it does come, it comes less often, but when it does come, I am ready, okay? And there are ways in which, and I've taken a bunch of notes here just to help me keep my my talk time short. So I don't over talk each one, because I can do that. I have a tendency of doing that. So, so we talked about the triggers, and we talked about some of the causes, and there's more triggers, obviously, but there's a primary cause, okay? Storm preparedness. Have a checklist. This is just in the beginning, right? And now, as you're just starting this idea, if you want to implement this, this is just in the beginning. You just do this checklist in the beginning, just like you would if there was a hurricane. If you were living in Hurricane Alley, you'd want to have a checklist of what you would need to do. And everybody knows that when there's a problem, you go grocery shopping. Okay, everybody knows how to do that one. But there are some, if you're a store owner, you have to take different precautions, right? If you're a store owner, you're going to go and buy wood and nails and all kinds of stuff to hold your inventory together and make sure that things don't fall apart. You're also going to clear out important paperwork and, whatever it is that's on the checklist for stores, because like I don't own stores, I can't tell you, but I'm sure that there are extra precautions, right? So you, as someone who has the tendency to have a depressive flare-up, or I would say a depression storm occur within your system, then you would want to have a checklist, and you would need to itemize those things on a piece of paper somewhere, right? So first, get it together. Don't wait until you feel it coming. Like, this is not like what you do days before you feel the onset of something, or when you get triggered or anything like that, because really that's the process. The storm is already brewing. And that's when you begin to have cognitive distress and not really being able to computate things well, and stuff begins to overload, and it's just not the right time to try to plan. Nobody plans in the midst of the storm. By then it's too late. The storm's already happening, and the devastation is already happening, and you're interacting with people all irritable and creating bad chemistry and getting on people's nerves, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you already have your compounding issues of just this stuff happens normal in life, like menopause, like children leaving the home, like that already happens organically in life. And then you're adding the fact that you're having a storm because you haven't fully dealt with, and fully is years and years and years and years. Like it's for some people never, because they think they have all their life, and you don't know what all your life is. So make your list, have storm preparedness, and the first things first is that if you have been using, and I'm going to stop doing that because for some reason it looks like it's blurry. If you have been applying a depression response, that is, you've been responding to depression, but you haven't been taking action towards depression, right? So when a storm hits, you can respond, get up and get out and run away or do some panic response, or you can go according to plan and follow the route that you have already known about previously and take the action and have your car ready and have this, that, or the next thing in your bag and all of that, having all those things gathered and ready in advance, and you could just kind of get up and follow the flow, right? So it is key to make sure that you get your list together of what the order of that's going to be, like what's your evacuation plan. If you've already been experiencing depression and your go-to place is the couch, okay, your body and your mind already know what you've been doing with depression. So to implement this plan, you kind of have to have an evacuation plan for what you used to do, because your brain wants to default to what it's like. We are by nature, just our human being is by nature, we are repetitive, and we learn by repetition and by having a schedule and having structure and a routine. So if that's not in place, then we just kind of go haywire and, we do impulse response. So to depression, you want to have a plan of action, not just an impulse response, okay? Because impulse responses can be dangerous in depression. Impulse responses could mean you're going to rely on dependency, coping mechanisms, alcohol, substance abuse, other substance abuses, sex addiction. You're going to backtrack into binge eating or whatever it is that was a coping strategy that was unhealthy for you. Oftentimes those are the perfect storm conditions for those things to reignite, right? So the best thing to do is be prepared so that there's no impulse response, right? That you're going to just follow that routine that you've already put in place for when the storm comes, okay? So just making the acknowledgement and then preparing for what is your evacuation plan, or what is your plan of action versus your impulse response. So don't go to old places, right? So if you go doing the things that weren't working for you, and you're doing those patterns and you're repeating those patterns as your distress plan, like, that's not going to be very effective. So go back to the list and stick with the list, okay? What does that list look like? I'll go over a couple things here. Move all this stuff out of the way. Identify safe places in your house. If there was a big storm coming, that's what they would tell you to do. If you were at school or whatever, they say, okay, get in a bathroom, stand in the door frame. They tell you to go to the basement, lean against the west wall, or whatever it is. So this is something you need to establish in your house, in your home or your apartment, or if you live with your family. Doesn't matter whose house it is, or it only matters where you live, because you are a creature of habit. You're going to go back to those old ways, those old responses. So to create a new one, you have to have that plan ready-made, right? So now you're going to identify when you're not triggered, when things are seeming to be copacetic. This is when you do this, okay? Identify the safe spaces in your house. Safe space would not include what was previously not working. It would include spaces like, I have a chair over here, a nice wingback chair, and I could identify that as a safe space. I would also prepare that space for when a storm hits. right? So if I want to hang a blanket over it, an electric blanket that is warming, that would be comforting and soothing to me, I will have it there and leave it there. Okay, some people, if you don't have an electric blanket, throw one in a dryer, but hang it over the chair so that it's ready for you and it will receive you when there is a storm. You are storm ready. Okay, I have my teacup station. No, really, I do. Like, I don't know if I can show you. See my tea station over there? See, there's a little depressions in. Like, I go there and I put my feet up, and I grant myself the permission to restore. Okay, to first buckle down for the storm, right? In case there's debris or anything like that. I don't want any repercussions on the people surrounding me, right? So I have to do what safeguards the people around me from the storm inside of me, okay? So, and also protect and secure myself from the storm. So I have my tea there. I make sure that I have my little snacks that I like. I don't buy them all because I do want to encourage myself during that process, in that state of depression, when the storm is there, to get out and go and purchase some more things that would, within my limits, okay? If this is not something that's healthy for you to do, like to go shopping, if you're a shopaholic, if that's your default, don't shop, pre-shop, and just have it waiting there. Whatever those comfort foods are for you, let them be minimal, but let them be, okay? This is not a time for severe deprivation. This is a time for you to decompress. This is a time for you to allow your brain to reset itself, okay? Because you can't force that to happen. All you can do is flow with it and allow whatever transpires, whatever the brain needs to heal, to take place. You need to have proper sleep. You need to make sure that you're drinking plenty of fluid. Doesn't have to be water, but fluid. There are lots of teas that you can get that help with countering depression. I can't and won't recommend any. I have some that I use that work for me. So you will try what works with your system. Okay, if it's not feeling right and it doesn't seem to work, don't give up on it altogether. Try a different one, right? Try a different one, because the idea is to find the system, find the formula that works for you. Okay, but this is just an outline and a sketch by which you can use to kind of guide and you fill in the blanks of which works for you. Okay, so I have my space ready, my warm fuzzy slippers, everything that I need to help to console my soul. Okay, and soothe myself during the storm. But I give myself a set of guidelines. Okay. Because that's the idea with the list, and preparedness means that it doesn't just go any way. Like, there's some order to this, okay? There's some order to this. I give myself 72 hours, okay? And I do the first 24, the first 48, and the first 72. Notice I said first 3 times. So you need to think about it in terms of firsts, okay? First 24 hours, first 48 hours, and first 72 hours. When you rolls over into the second 24 hours and the second 48 hours and the second 72 hours, you should have already seen a therapist. Okay, so some of this is like gauging your to be able to kind of measure how the storm is progressing. So if the storm is progressing and it's a more minor depression or a minor storm or less severe storm or category 1 storm or a category 2 storm, then you might be able to round this out, and you should be able to round this out in 72 hours, okay? And if it's a more severe storm, then it may take you longer. And if it has to go into the second, you should have already seen a therapist. The only way to make sure that you should have already seen a therapist in that time is that when the onset of the first is coming, you make the appointment. So you call and you make the appointment. The appointment could be made like whoever is your guidance, whoever is your counselor, whoever is your advisor, whoever is that safe person that you go to that understands your condition. you're not gonna go and puke somewhere all over the street. You know, you don't go and get sick outside all over where people are looking like, what is wrong with you? You go to the hospital, right? Like, you go to where people understand what is happening to you. This is the same thing. You can have people set up in advance that already know what you're dealing with, and they already know how to support you and how to be there through your situation. They don't have to be there by your side every moment of the storm, because that could put them at risk too, because they could become depressed. So what you would want to do is have a rotation of support. You have someone you talk to that is specific, like if what's triggering you is something sexual abuse related, you have someone that's going to talk to you about that. And if you have someone who's talking to you regarding some childhood maltreatment trigger, or something that's domestic violence related, or something that's workload related, you don't overuse or misuse your network. Know in advance who to talk to for what types of things, so you don't misuse them, and then they don't want to be around you anymore because it's just too much, and you become a toxic energy for them. So it's really, really important to have on your list the points of contact and what you would contact them about, right? So you wouldn't contact you wouldn't call the Humane Society when you are having a fire. Like, you gotta match up the type of support that you have with the type of triggers that are routinely cycling through your system, okay? Because if you're experiencing depression, these triggers are repetitive. These triggers have come before. These triggers and these types of trauma types have resurfaced in various ways before. So make sure that you kind of identify who those people are. If you don't have enough of those people, that's work you need to do, right? So work you need to do is to establish those people so that you have done the preventative care work in storm prevention, storm preparedness, right? Storm preparedness. So that's the next thing, is within your first 24 hours, you need to be implementing that part of your list, okay? And then also on that list, which goes into your next 24 hours, all right? Excuse me again, good Lord. Talked about emergency crisis. Oh, make sure that on those include your hotline numbers and stuff like that. So obviously, if you have certain medical plans, not everyone talks to everybody. They may say that, but don't just Google something and think that you're going to be able to get help, because you'll have someone to talk to, but you may not be able to get help. And that can be depressing. That can be like, oh, nobody cares, and you're still like alone, and all of that starts to like come in there. So already have contacts on that list that are assured support, not, in other words, pre-screen them, vet them, right? Don't just be too random, because too much random calling, you begin doing the whole psychic thing. Like, I got to call everybody and find out what everybody has to say about it. And that doesn't help you. And the idea of cutting this whole thing short is to make sure that you are prepared to do things that don't waste time in depression. Like, if you were doing all these steps after depression started, oh, I got to go find a blanket. And like, first of all, your mind wouldn't even think about taking care of yourself at that time. It's like too late for it to be really thinking how best to take care of itself. So you got to think about those things before the onset of depression, and before once the trigger happens, it's already like on its road to too late, because your brain has already started to overwork about the trigger, okay, or a series of triggers and circumstances. So you live in the eye of the storm all the time. If you have persistent depression, you live in the eye of the storm all the time. The eye of the storm is the calmest part. And then just as you think the storm is over, boom, and there it is again, sometimes stronger. Okay, so it's always doing this type of thing, orbiting and rotating in your mind. Okay, so as it's cycling through and as it's patterning through and as you process and work through some of the traumatic violation issues, the cycles become less and less frequent and less traumatic as they re-enter your safety zone, you know, inside. So if you have this plan in action for your action plan ahead of time, you will be less anxious. It will reduce the anxiety involved because you're already ready through acknowledgement, prepared to make the steps. Okay, I'm ready right now. Let's go, bring it. Now that's how my attitude is. You coming for me? I'm ready. And when it hits, I surrender. Okay, I surrender, but I also make sure that I am in command. So the depression is not in command. I gave you permission. I gave you permission in this moment of surrender because I need my brain to be able to heal up and do what it needs to do to reposition itself. And the more I resist that, resistance is futile, the longer this thing drags out. So that first 24 hours is about surrender, right? So you get your space, you find your safe space, and you what? Buckle down for the storm because here it comes, okay? You do the same thing you would do in a real disaster situation. You stay put, right? You buckle down. But all the while, you're thinking about what next. You're not staying there. Nobody in a storm or in a disaster stays there. They think about what next. What is my next plan of action? Okay, I'm in this, and I'm allowing this to play its course, but not forever. And it sucks miserably, but it sucks less miserably when you are in command of it, when you have authorized certain degree of flow. Certain degree of flow prevents mass disaster. Okay, prevents you from becoming part of the storm and acting out as part of the storm, and then that then flows over into the rest of your life, your family, your friends, your work environment. You take that to work. Their bottom line is bothered by your situation and you're fired. So it could have a series of a snowball effect that is not favorable to you, and nor did you want or plan to have happen. So think about that. Once touchdown happens, right? Once it's touchdown and tuck down, right? So that's what you do. When a touchdown comes, you tuck down and you wait it out. So that first 24 hours is just wait it out. If you've got to space out, if you've got to just be. You got 24 hours, okay? So what you're telling yourself, you got 24 hours. You got 24 hours. After that 24 hours is over, okay? If you need to call in support for your kids, babysitter, whatever, if you need to go elsewhere, remember, this is all stuff you figure out in your safety zone time. You're making your checklist. This is all stuff you find out when you're safe from the storm and there's no storm brewing, okay? And you establish that first so that when it happens, you make the right phone calls. If depression is in remission, I like to say that because you're in the eye of the storm. When it's in remission, you're back in the eye. And then when you're not in remission, the storm is all over the place again. But so the eye is still there. It's just hitting and missing while you're trying to get your work done and all this extra. So be sure that you make the proper phone calls to your work, that if you need mental health days, that you have a medical notice on file so they understand, right? It's your responsibility to let them know. Otherwise, you are pressuring yourself to go to work in mental distress, and that adds more mental distress. So you are, it is really important for you to prepare for those days, right? And to prepare your work environment into, you don't have to over disclose. You're just allowed to take a mental health day. I mean, people went to the Eagles game and they all took off. I mean, they went to the parade and then more people took off. So surely you can take a mental health day, okay? be good to yourself, be kind to yourself in that way, especially during distress. Speak to depression during those 24 hours and in your 48th hour. But you begin towards the end of your 24th hour, you know, in your final hours before you go to bed. You begin the process of talking depression down. Okay, I know that you're here. I know why you're here. You got only 48 hours left. You know, you talk to depression. Part of talking to depression, especially if it's in remission and it's come back, you already know the words to say. You know what has been effective in past conversations with depression. And by depression, I mean, you're talking to the storm. You know, who doesn't go outside and wish for rain? Who doesn't go outside and you know, don't start raining on me now? Like, who doesn't do that, right? So you're talking to the storm. And what you want to encourage is how powerful and wonderful and great that you are and will be on the other side of this, that how much growth is going to come from the moment of depression, and what you're going to learn and how you're going to apply yourself differently. It's like, you know, when you're on a plane and it's all that turbulence, like, oh God, if you could just get me out of this, I'll promise I'll do this, this, and this, and this, and this. Well, you know, it's a conversation you're having with the deity that you didn't believe, but suddenly you believe, or whatever, you know, you believe more of now. These are conversations. It's okay to have open-end conversations with the thing that is distressing you most, okay? And that's how you fight back. You fight back with these words of affirmation and these talking yourself up. Football players and basketball players, a coach talks them up, you know? It's okay to kind of self-coach yourself up to the next step, even if it sucks, even if it sucks miserably. It's just to affirm that you're not staying here, that this is temporal, okay? That this is not permanent. This is a moment, and this moment is going to pass. The moment might be 3 days. The moment might be a week. The moment might be 2 weeks, but it will not be perpetual. It will not be forever. And on the other side of this moment, just like on the other side of other moments, I did this and I did that and I accomplished this and I accomplished that, and I will do the same this time, okay? So this is where you are basically talking dirty. Talking dirty to the storm, like, oh, what you heard type of thing, okay? I am going to come out on the other side of this. So whatever needs, and it doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to take you hours, just repeatedly within the last few hours before you go to bed, okay? So you say a little something and you just get back down, tuck back down. You say a little something and you tuck back down. You say a little something, it's like coming up for air, okay? But you're still in it, okay? You're still respecting the process. And then that night, you turn on the radio. You turn on music, whether it can be, I prefer, okay, and science even prefers, the symphony, orchestra music. Any music without lyrics is preferable. It can be ocean, natural, organic music, ocean music, sound waves. It can be, not really birds chirping, but it can just be breeze music. It can be anything, kind of massage music, you know, but nothing with words, okay? Because you don't want to create animosity, aggression. You don't want to create, because our words do play with our minds, our dreams and things do play with what we hear on the outside when we're asleep. So you want to make sure, we only have a few minutes left. So you want to make sure that you don't filter conversations and don't create conversations, because your brain will create conversations with the words, and maybe it will create frustrations. Like, don't sleep with the TV on, don't even play spiritual music with words, because there could be parts of you that resent that, and then it's brewing and instigating areas of your subconscious that might actually be opposed to what you're hearing, even if you believe it in your conscience. So when you're sleeping, you go deep. But the type of music that is symphony has been an orchestras, and so long as they're not the manic type, because there can be some that'll like, you don't want to do that. You want to do the nice melodic, you know, Bach and Beethoven, and, you know, do some of that. You know, I know that it's kind of like not what some of us would do, but do it, because the brain uses those sound waves, those good, healthy vibes, to heal. Okay, so what we're doing through the night is encouraging the wires to heal, just encouraging, softly massaging with music. And music has been proven to change the construction of water from water that's not really healthy to water that's really healthy in hours. So that is something that has been very effective for me. And so even if you don't want to disturb anybody else, just put your headset on, or put your wireless on, and just set it and go to sleep. It will actually help you go to sleep if you're having problems going to sleep. So it has like an extra benefit. And also drink some tea that helps you go to sleep. Chamomile tea is great. Some people don't like it, but you can put honey in it, and it helps out a lot. So that's, you know, a very important part of the first 24 hours, because it begins while the storm is going on, to try to silence the storm, right? To try to kind of soothe the impact of the storm while it's happening. Okay, so the next 24 hours, okay, the next is your first 48, which is your next 24 hours, okay? You want to walk out of this thing alive. And if you think that you can't or that you won't, don't wait for the therapy. Get direct intervention, whether that is a hospital, whether that is a outpatient program, or whether it is a 911 call. Get immediate intervention if you feel like you can't walk out of it alive, okay? But you should be at a place when you wake up in the morning. You'll still be depressed, but it will lighten. The load will have lightened, right? So you would have come through the storm and like a little bit of lights out, but it's just not right yet. Like there's still like, now you got disaster to deal with, right? There's still like things that are been tossed around, and they're still foggy, and clarity is a problem, and you're still trying to get your thoughts together, and you're still lethargic, and you still feel wrung out, and the fatigue part is still there, okay? So just pay mind to your system and to what's happening, so you know what state you're in when you wake up on the 24th, end of the 24th and into the 48th hour. So you're going to come out of that slowly. Tea and conversation, tea and conversation. Lots of tea and conversation, and notations, or doodle. If you can't think of anything to say, tea and doodle, okay? Get a piece of paper and just doodle. Just doodle. If words come, write a word. If thoughts come, write the thoughts, but doodle, right? Male, female, this is effective. So the tea is soothing. It's also hydrating. It's, and by the way, in the very beginning, I left out the most important, one of the most important components. Take your meds, right? And take them all the time. The tea reminded me. Tea and meds, take your meds. If you're not on medications, I'm not on medications, I take your vitamins. Take your vitamins, okay? Whatever those are, you may need to increase iron, zinc, calcium, K, B12. You might need to increase some of these ones to help offset the mental effects and the emotional effects of depression. So do that in combination with the tea and the hydration, okay? So day 2, again, begin your tea and your meds or your vitamins and hydration. Good hydration. Hydration is good to eliminate the toxins of stress. Anytime you're depressed, you're already stressed. You were stressed before depression. So toxins help release, the fluid helps release all of that, okay? Continuing with your affirmations. You know, that's probably the most uncomfortable thing, because the brain is already pre-programmed to say some god-awful things to you and remind you about how suckish life is, and to remind you about how unworthy you are and how you're a loser and all this extra. So your mind is already kind of pre-programmed to do that. You might do it a little bit anyway, but you catch yourself and you're just like, I know that's not true. I know it isn't true, but I'm still saying it. When you get to that place, it's kind of funny. Like, if you're not at that place, I apologize. But like, I'm totally at that place where when I hear myself say that, I'm just like that was really scripted. Like, my brain was, that script is in there deep. But you know better at some point, right? And so you've trained your brain that, hey, the script isn't the same anymore. So yeah, okay, but no. So, keep your positive affirmations. Every time a negative one comes, counter it with a positive one. If you can't find a positive one, find an alternate one, okay? Because sometimes people don't like, I don't like all that positive shit. It don't make me feel no better. Okay, find an alternate one, a less destructive one, a more constructive one. Huh? How about that one? Okay, so I always say prepare a letter. That should be in your checklist of things to do. Prepare a letter for yourself, right? Prepare a letter that talks to you, the you that's in depression, okay? This is not a letter that you write to someone else. This is a letter that you're writing to yourself based on what you already know you're going to be experiencing. And if you're alone, right? If you're home alone and everyone's at work or at school or whatever, and you're having those thoughts and you can't find alternate words to contradict those thoughts or to counter those thoughts that are self-destructive and weighting you down in depression for longer and deeper, then this letter is what you open up and you read. And you wrote it, so you know it's true. You wrote it in your truth when you were well. Okay, so you know that this is true. So you want to read this letter that you prepared to yourself that is a positive memory lane, right? So you've been here before. You're a great parent. You have been needed. You have been wanted. You have been loved. You are needed, you are wanted, you are loved. These are the things that you have done. You have accomplished this. And despite having depression before, you were able to do this. You rose above, and the memories that you forget that you did, those victories in between, like, pronounce those, like, remember those, recall those. Because really, honestly, your memory is at a loss when you're in the throes of depression. Like, you're not remembering any of that. And you're just not even, like, able to think about those things. But when you are positively triggered, see, trigger is an opportunity. I'll go into that in another one because I've already got a time already. Trigger is an opportunity, right? So when you are positively triggering your brain to counteract the self-destructive speech, so your letter becomes a new script, right? And then you begin to reprogram your body to the storm differently. Right? So you're putting your plan of action into action. You're doing the work. So read motivations, read the one that you wrote to yourself, but read others. Go online, and we all have things access on your phone. Read others. And when you read them, you will find ones that have had harder and tougher experiences. That's helpful. Sometimes it's like, wow, maybe it's not so bad because, geez, my life isn't that. Like, it could be worse. My adopted dad used to always say that it could always be worse. And I'm like, yeah, it really could. That, makes me, I'm still feeling bad, but it does make me feel a little bit better. But see, every degree that you move in the direction of out alive, right? Every degree counts. Every measure of positive reinforcement moves you that much faster and that much smoother out of the storm. Okay, so positive movies and positive songs and positive, all that positive input should be going on in the 48 hours. Okay, so 24 hours just to sit in it, and then, and of course, flushing your system, and then 48 hours to input positivity and health and motivation and hope and inspiration and input. Don't have to be as responsive to input. Just let it come in. Let it come in and do its job. At night, 48th hour, end of the night, towards the end of the day, make some positive affirmations about yourself. They don't have to be all fancy. Just look in the mirror. If you can't look in the mirror, that's okay. You'll get there one day. But, you know, close your eyes and reflect about some of the greater aspects of yourself. Okay, call them out, whatever they are. I am talented. I am an artist. I have been a mother for 25 years. I have been a good cook, and my food does taste good. And I enjoy cigars. And I enjoy my walks with my babe. And my babe loves me. And these are all things. They don't have to be grand, right? They just have to be things that reinforce the structure of your mind that is strong still, right? That has the power to combat the storm, right? That has the power to that you exercise that part, so it has the power to combat the storm, right? To quiet the storm. So those are what you do on 48. 72, right? 72 is where it really comes in. If you really want to shorten the depression, okay, the time that you're into depression, in your steps, this is all done in your steps, right? Because it becomes easier when you play it out. I know it's taking me a long time to explain it, but that's because I'm going through every detail, okay? In the 72 hours, the final 72 hour, this is output, okay? You don't output, notice everything was input in 48, and now output, okay? Now this is strictly you creating, you bringing forth a co-creative attitude, a co-creative thought process, a co-creative, how can I contribute something positive today? Something healthy, something constructive. It doesn't have to be huge. It could just be baking cupcakes. It could be writing a story. It could be crocheting. It could be doing puzzles. It could be painting. It could be sewing. It could be photography, creating a collage, working on a photo album, something that you started several depressions ago. Like, you know, it could be any of these things that you have already on your checklist designed as default outputs for that day, for that 72 hours. Okay, so get creative, do creative. Creativity, the act, not the thought, the act of creativity interrupts the storm. It is like fighting fire with fire, right? It is like the storm hit such a big wall that it could go no further. It just bounced back and could go no further. Okay, so the barrier to doing this is not when the storm is its most strength, is that it is really strong and it's most disastrous, because that's that first time it hits you. That's not when you do it, because if you do it, you could cause even more damage and you stay in it even longer. Remember the whole resistance is futile thing? Like, that's really true. Like, if you, the more resistance you put in that first 24 hours, the more time that it takes, because even the act of resisting is stressing the situation. Just give the mind its organic time to resettle the storm. By the 72nd hour, or within that timeline there, within that window of you now outputting, the shift begins to happen. okay, depending on the severity or the category, right? And just like any storm, after the storm, you have to do restoration. Just when you thought it was all over, right? But look at Texas, look at everywhere that has a disaster. You still have to rebuild. And by the way, life's still happening while you're still restoring, okay? So in preparation for the next time, you may think, oh, I'm strong now, I've closed that gap. But then, you know, as other things are happening in life, that gap is growing and growing and growing. And another storm may have the opportunity to touch down somewhere in here, right? So if you go past the 72 hours, get help, okay? You should have already arranged for a therapy session just to kind of talk back what your experience was and talk through with it and reinforce that, yes, I stuck to the plan. And if you didn't stick to the plan, you try again next time, but you know, how effective was it for you? And, you know, you talk it out. Talk therapy is wonderful. Be able to jot some notes down if you want to reflect on, oh, maybe this didn't work for me as well. So next time I'm going to try doing beading. I'm going to try, you know, maybe you found out about some new paint thing. Whatever you do, avoid doing any of the things which include addictive behavior, okay? Don't default to binge eating. If you're getting your snacks and your goodies and your party pooper foods, you know, your downtime snacks, if you're getting that, you get within moderation. You don't buy the whole aisle. You buy some chips and some guacamole, okay? You buy a little thing of ice cream. You don't buy the whole half gallon or a whole tub of it, within moderation, right? So that you just take a little bit and you take a little bit, and it just helps you get through and know that there's something positive and something happy. 72 hour, you could start, if there's nothing else that you create, put your makeup on. Take a bath, put your lotion on, you know, self-pamper, start the pampering process. It may seem like input, but it's output for yourself, and that's fine, just so long as you're creating, and that is part of who you are. The more steps in that you're able to make within that 72 hours, the better. When the 72 hours are over, you should be able to be more stable, okay? And begin the recovery process from the storm, okay? And I'll talk about that process in another hour. So I've gone over my hour, guys. I'm so sorry, but I hope you'll forgive me. I'm long-winded, but I am very passionate and very hopeful for those who may listen that there's some seed in here that will blossom in your soul and help you minimize and reduce the further devastation created by depression, created by anxiety, created by all these unusual relationships that we build with the sticks and the strings we're trying to hold on to in life, you know? So more tomorrow. I'm talking till someone listens. I'm not sure. I guess this Google chat room, I'm not sure if it's the same as the YouTube chat room. I had a YouTube chat room before. I don't know if anyone's able to see it, but I'm in Google Air. It says Google Hangouts, Google Chrome Live. So if you're able to find me that way, it may be better. I don't know, because I'm not tech savvy, so I can't tell you, and I wouldn't tell you what I don't know. So that's just it. I can't help you help me even right now, okay? Anyways, thank you so much. Love to you all, and all you do, be well. Make good and healthy choices for yourself, okay? Take care. Bye-bye.